Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, after 27 long years, a jury this week found out what had long been suspected, that the 96 victims of the Hillsborough disaster were unlawfully killed and that the chief superintendent at the time was responsible for manslaughter by gross negligence. Justice for the 96 was proclaimed across Liverpool, and the solidarity of the ordinary families who'd fought for so long and with such tenacity against a system and institutions seemingly designed to thwart them gave new meaning to their club's anthem, "You Never Walk Alone." But justice is far from complete. Criminal investigations are now underway, one on the run-up to the tragedy, the other on the subsequent cover-up. The actions of the South Yorkshire Police are at the centre of both, and that force's behaviour has only added to the public's increasing loss of confidence in the police in general across the country after a series of scandals. Here's proud Scouser, LBC presenter Shelagh Fogarty with a take of the week.
The headlines around Hillsborough this week have screamed justice, justice for the families. But it seems to me that there was, yes, a moral justice for the families this week, but in no way criminal justice. That is still to come. The lies by the police, the cover-up by the police, has left me and others wondering what exactly is wrong in British policing. Three members of my family are police officers, so I know that there are good, decent people in the police. But Hillsborough isn't the only reason why public trust in the police is at an all-time low. Whenever I talk about public trust in the police on my radio show, a pattern emerges. Young black men tell me they don't trust the police. Black mothers tell me that they train their sons to handle situations involving the police. And police officers who ring tell me it's rotten at the top. Even the former Attorney General, Dominic Grieve, said that there is an irony in the fact that we call ourselves a civilised society, but Hillsborough isn't the only example of institutional cover-up. The Stephen Lawrence murder investigation, Operation Elvedon, the Westminster paedophile ring, and the investigations into child sexual exploitation. The police are meant to serve you and me, they're meant to make us feel safe. But damning report after damning report seems to suggest that very little has changed since the miners' strike. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary is pushing for more powers to allow police to poke their noses into our private lives. Would you trust them? I'm not sure I do. Justice for the 96 sounds very sweet indeed, but I don't see any evidence yet to suggest that a cover-up like the one seen at Hillsborough couldn't happen again.
And from the courthouse hotel bar prison cells to our very own crimes against television here on This Week. Shelagh Fogarty joins us now. Alan Johnson, former Home Secretary, you heard the list there, not just Hillsborough, though that is one of the most huge, but the failure to confront sex slavery, Rotherham, Rochdale, Oxford, the Stephen Lawrence case, waste of Operation Midland in the supposed VIP child abuse, Jimmy Savile, Cliff Richard in the helicopter, Plebgate, Ian Tomlinson unlawfully killed at a G20 demo, the ludicrous undercover operations against various green groups. What's gone wrong with the police?
Well, I think the question that Shelagh is raising is this still the case? I mean, we're talking about historic incidents here. Tomlinson, of course, 2010, that was much more, or 2008, I think it was much more recent. Have the police changed? I like to think that the police have changed. There's a kind of different approach. If you look at those television dramas, Life on Mars and Ashes to Ashes, that was what the police was like. There's no doubt about that. Has it reformed sufficiently for us to believe that something like Hillsborough couldn't happen again? I think that's the big question. And it's certainly a question now that those brave families have got the truth, not justice yet, but the truth, that I think Theresa May and others, she was asked about this in Parliament, and she put a lot of store, and she's been tremendous on this, by the way, she put a lot of store on the code of ethics that is now being produced for police to follow. I felt there was a different atmosphere from the kind of police forces I remember in the past. I was brought up in Notting Hill. Black kids on the street of Notting Hill wouldn't give you any sustenance at all that the police were anything other than enemies. And I think the police have tried hard to recruit black officers. They tried hard to get rid of the racism and sexism that was there, and there in other parts of society, I have to say, at the time too.
Didn't seem to try very hard in Rotherham or Rochdale.
No.
Or I mean, this is the line
we're talking about one police force.
This is the line that we always hear, that they've learned the lessons. We're not like that anymore. But actually, in this most recent inquest, the police were still not telling the truth about what happened.
Well, that's the very point I was going to say in response to what you've just said there. I don't doubt that some of the changes that you've said have come in. I don't doubt that for a second. Like I said, I've got two brothers who are police officers and a sister-in-law, and I know how they operate, and I know how intelligently they operate as individual officers. But you're quite right, Andrew, in the inquests, the lies were peddled out again, almost to be tested to exhaustion. And still, people have said to me since Tuesday, but, yes, but. And you think, what more do you want here? They've been tested to exhaustion, and they were rolled out recently. That wasn't historical for the families. It was a few weeks ago.
Has there been a breakdown in the population in general, even among sort of law-abiding middle-class folk? Has there been a breakdown in confidence or trust in the police?
I think there's certainly been a sharp reduction, and I've experienced it myself. I mean, I was part of a generation of Conservative politicians who, would say to the public, we trust the police, the police are at the forefront of the fight against crime, and that has changed almost beyond recognition. And I think on far too many occasions it seemed that lying was the first response of the police. But I think I should also broaden the issue out and say that I don't think the National Health Service is very different. Time and again, as a constituency member, you would try to inquire into what had happened to someone in hospital, and the doors would close and the solidarity would be there, and there'd be denial to begin with that the person had even been a patient. Or you try investigating, some of these things that are alleged to have happened in army barracks, and again, the ranks close, and there's...
Because that also involved the police.
Well, to some extent, yes, but not only.
Not only, correct. Not only.
And I just think there is, a misplaced institutional loyalty. What is very clear in the case of the police, and I think is less clear in the case of the army, in fact, I don't think it is the case in the case of the army, is that the lying is set by example from the top.
And I think, Alan, you're right to say that Theresa May has been excellent on this and was excellent on this in the Commons the other day. But for me, the most important voice in the Commons on Wednesday was actually Dominic Grieve, when he said, shortly after Theresa May and Andy Burnham had their exchange, he said, we ourselves, meaning Parliament, we ourselves and the institutions that are meant to protect the public, to serve the public, all need to go into a period of self-examination. That's precisely what he said. And I thought that was the most mature...
He's a former Tory Attorney General.
Yeah, and he's the person who applied to have the original verdicts of Hillsborough overturned once the panel had reported back. And I thought that statement in the Commons, for my taste anyway, was the most important one.
Isn't it also a case, though, of demonising people who are, or groups of people who the police or the army or the authorities think don't have the ability to respond? So football fans at that time were all thought of as being fair game, whether it's the poorest in our community, which was in a sense the racial minorities, that there was a feeling by authority that these people who don't have a voice and can't get back at us, that they would take a different attitude if there were people involved who were more
May I say-
authoritative, more powerful, had more money to pursue them through the courts?
May I say something about people having a voice? Because I worked at Radio Merseyside on the day that Hillsborough happened, and on the night of the tragedy, I was placed on reception, basically, to just be there when people came in. And the fans came immediately from the train stations and the coach stations and from their own cars into Radio Merseyside, Radio City, the Liverpool Echo, because they knew then that they were being lied about. And they knew that they didn't have a voice. So they came to their local radio stations to get a voice. And they did get the voice that way. But you're right, that without local journalists actually staying with them for those 27 years, they would not have had that voice.
What would police reform look like? I mean, if police are being badly led, and I don't think it's just South Yorkshire, that may be the most egregious. If they're badly led, the morale is bad. Is there not a need for a proper professional officer class in the police in this country?
Well, that's what is being introduced by the Tom Windsor report. They tried it, the Trenchard review in the 30s, and then abandoned it. I think it's accountability, isn't it? And the different levels of accountability that have been introduced they've changed frequently. Now the IPCC have come under some fire. I think they're going to change again. And it's finding the right level of accountability so that people can be assured that there is a proper procedure. Actually, it's the same in the NHS. You know, that they have various groups. People come to their MP because the system, which is now, I think, PALS, just doesn't.
It's quite hard to hold people accountable, though, when they form a cabal and lie. It's quite hard to, as the people in Merseyside have found it. Is there not a case for police reform in this country?
Yes, but I very much sympathise with your question about what that might look like. Having had some experience with the armed forces, I think the armed forces have, on the whole, a pretty good model, and therefore I think probably that should be tried in the case of the police. I suppose there is a genuine problem here, which is you're trying to train people to believe that they can absolutely rely on the person next to them, whether you're talking about a policeman or a soldier or even a nurse or a doctor. And how you make that compatible with the belief that nonetheless those people will tell the truth about you if you have made a mistake or if you've made a bad decision. I mean, I can see there is a genuine dilemma there, but clearly at the moment that dilemma is being resolved in a very unsatisfactory way.
Sheila, final thought from you. Well, what one thing would you like to see change with the way the police operate?
Well, I thought it was interesting that you said is part of the solution an officer class at the top of the police, and I suspect I know what you mean when you put it that way, but actually I think the class might be part of this, and that actually what you need rising to the top of the police forces, I'm not promoting my own family, I'm just saying that you need just decent, intelligent men and women, whatever their background, whatever their educational background.
Because I didn't mean social background.
Yes, I know, I understood what you meant, yeah. But I do think that is part of it, that one of the police officers who rang me on Tuesday, on the day of the actual findings of the inquest, said to me, he was a serving police officer in Essex Police Force, and he said, the promotion system stinks. Good, decent officers steer clear of it. And that's what needs to change. They need to stop steering clear of it.
Sheila, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
I've been getting